We got Sammie Ninja 250 back here. This is the one with the exploded transmission on it. We're going to go ahead and do the brake job on the rear today on it. We're going to change out the brake pads on the back of the Ninja 250. So once we get these things changed out, we're going to show you how everything works and what it looks like on the inside. Last time we did the front, so we're going to show the rear. We've got a couple bolts. We've got a bolt right in here, which is a Allen key type bolt. I've got a ratchet for that. There's two under there. You want to loosen those up to remove it. And then there's another two that are up here. These are the two that retain the brake pads themselves. So you want to loosen these before you get the caliper off. It's a little tight to get your hands in here, and the exhaust pipe does get hot. So be sure that you don't put your hands on the exhaust pipe, or that you let it cool down first, which is probably a smarter thing to do. So loosen up the two bolts on the caliper. That'll drop the pads, and then get underneath and remove the two bolts, and the entire caliper will lift off. Okay, we've got the bolts out of the bottom of the caliper, so the whole caliper literally lifts right off. That's all there is to it. We can look in the bottom here, and we can see just how shot these brake pads are. In the case of yours, it looks like they're actually not dragging metal on metal. You've got a little more meat on there than what you thought, but they're still due for replacement. Now we've got these two bolts that are right on here. We've got them loosened, so now we can remove them the rest of the way using our wonderful Allen key adapter socket, because regular Allen keys suck. It's nice if I use the right size. And just remove them right just like so. As long as you've got them loose, this job is easy, but had you have chosen to loosen them later with a ratchet, you'll discover it's practically impossible unless you have a really, really strong hand to hold the caliper in your hand to pull those bolts out. There's one, and the second one is going to come right out of here. Alright. Here's your brake pads, and quite literally, once you've got those pins out, they fall out. Old pad versus new pad. They're shit. You probably wouldn't have lasted very long on it, though. I would say you'd probably get another month or so out of it, and if you were a little abusive on it, probably less than that. Your new pad, rather, has a lot more meat on it, so we're going to throw those right into place, and everything's going to be happy. Now, in my last video, some people said, "Oh, when you put the thing back together, you didn't clean the pistons." Well, the pistons on my bike were actually a lot cleaner than the ones that you see on here. These are quite dirty because Mr. Sammie has not been cleaning his brake calipers very well, now has he?
Nope.
So anyways, they're a little bit dirty, so we're going to clean those up. It's really just a matter of wiping them down because there's not a serious amount of grit on them or anything that's really disgusting. They are quite dirty, though. As you can see, my hands are turning black. When I took mine apart and I worked on mine, my hands were pretty clean through the whole job, so there wasn't too much to it. But we're going to have to push those pistons back in, and we're going to clean them up. So we're going to grab some paper towel. Okay, we've got the brake pistons cleaned, which a lot of people, once again, were whining about in my last video. We can see ourselves in them. They're looking nice and good. So the next step that we need to do is we need to push them back in where they belong. And it's just a matter of putting your thumb on them and squeezing them. And these suckers will very, very slowly go back into the caliper. Now you want to make sure you're pushing on both of them at the same time, because if you push on one, the other piston is going to go and pop out, and you're going to end up with a real mess. There's going to be brake fluid everywhere, and it's just going to be a real disaster, so I would suggest you don't do that. So push them both in at the same time, and if you have monkey grip fingers like I do, you're not going to have any problem shoving them all the way in. But shove them as far as they'll go until they stop, and then once they've stopped, you're ready to drop the pads in. And that's it. They're in. Alright, we've got two pads. We got one that has a little fishtail on it, and then we've got the other one that does not. Now, as I said in the last video, make sure your hands aren't too dirty, and if they are, don't touch the brake pad surface, because if you do, you'll contaminate it, and the brakes won't work quite correctly. Sometimes they're a little bit absorbent also, and it'll even pick up the grease and oil, and it'll stick in it. So be sure that you don't touch the pad surface. Now, the pads are going to be going in a certain way, and they're oriented a certain way, and it's really hard to get them backwards because of how they're constructed. This pad is going to go in just like this, and it's going to go flat against the back. And the one with the little fishy tail is going to go in front and drop in just like that. Then you grab one of your pins, okay, and you make sure the pads are shoved down in there as far as they're going to go, and put the pin in the back hole, and it should go right through the pads, providing you've got them in correctly. There it is.
Yay.
Alright, and then push in the second bolt, repeat process for the first. Push those pads into place and shove them in. That's it. Now we've got them in, you want to go ahead and thread these guys right back in and just snug them up, because we're not actually going to tighten those down until we get the caliper back on the bike. So just snug them up as best you can. And believe it or not, in the Kawasaki manual, there is no torque specification for these at all. Alright, that's it. Now you make sure that the pads have an adequate gap. Sometimes you got to put a little screwdriver in there to push them out. Alright, you make sure you have enough space between the two pads, because the disc is going to have to fit in between those two pads. So once you've got them spread, get ready to put your caliper back on, because it's just a matter of dropping it on just like that. The two mounting bolts here. Get your socket ready. And we're going to screw those things right back into the mount and hold it back onto the bike the way she belongs. Oh well, it lined up the first try. Usually I have to play with that one. Alright, we're tight. So you want to make sure you get those two bolts torqued in adequately to the proper torque specifications of the Ninja 250. And then you want to go ahead and tighten up the two brake pad retaining bolts that are on the top. So once you get these things tightened, just make them tight enough. You don't have to do anything freakish on them. If you tighten them too much, they'll probably strip, because they are mounting in what I believe is aluminum. So make them just tight enough. There is no torque spec on that. So just make sure you got them tight. And that's it. Everything's ready to go. There's your new brake pads. Pump it a couple times. And they're on. Ready to go for a ride. Now, are you familiar with bedding in the brakes?
Nope.
Generally, what I like to do to bed in the brakes is I go down the street and I just gently push on the brakes so that way they drag. Let them just drag just a little tiny bit, a couple 100 feet. That's all you need. And at that point, all the little grooves that are in the brake disc will chew into the brake pad, so that way the patterns match, and that way that pad will start working correctly. Now some people say bedding is not required, and they stomp on the brakes immediately and they just use them as if nothing's ever happened. But some people say if you do that, it'll warp the rotors. It'll warp the rotors, or some people say if that hasn't been allowed to bed in, but I've never experienced that. But if you want to be proper and you want to bed them in, just let the brakes drag a little bit. Otherwise, we're ready to go.
Cool.
Done.